Now you can see me.
Who? Who was this? I figured I must have imagined it. Was this what death was? My head swam. The chill left my body, and I felt as though I was floating in the air. Lifeless. Weightless. Nothing. My limbs were heavy. The pain was gone, and I was finally free. I didn't have to deal with the temple or how I was treated any longer. I was finally free. My foggy eyes cleared, and the light shifted, giving me a chance to see a flash of him in the light. His hand reached out to take mine, palm up. I hesitated for a moment, and knew my life would change the instant I agreed. If you could call it life by this point, my broken hand took his. Instead of being a servant of the Earth Goddess, I would become a daughter of night. His hand gently curled around mine and led me outside into the darkness. I didn't realize at the time, but we passed through the earth. I had to follow him without sight. I had to trust he was not leading me astray. My eyes did not take long to adjust. He led me down the stone slab walkway. Silently I followed behind him, filled with anticipation for my new life and eager to start anew. Everything had a blue hue, and I realized we were no longer under the earth. We wandered far from life and civilization. We were instead under the shade of a large tree. The twisted roots spanned out in all directions, and I found myself drawn to its power. It had coarse, spiraling patterns lining the roots. The tree was enormous, the span of many arm lengths, and I noticed the variety of carvings into it. In the middle of a circular ring was a large altar, carved out of stone, and big enough to have several people on it. The pillars surrounding it were stained a reddish brown, stained from centuries of blood. And how the circle called to me. It was home, a place I would belong. I could barely see his face. He walked around the perimeter and paused before each torch. The flame hissed, blew out, and snow swirled up in a spiral pattern. Each stride he made was long and confident.
Some of us are not for the world of the living, nor of the earth, child,
he answered tenderly. I climbed up on the large altar and stretched out. There was so much room here. The god of death moved my head to the side, so it was no longer underneath me. His hand caressed my forehead. For a god of death, the gesture was so gentle.
In life, you had no choice in the decisions made around you. They were always made for you by people who did not care for you, did not cherish you.
He allowed the statement to hang in the air. Since I was already dead, the memories were fading of how badly I was being treated by my peers and by my family. I looked up at him. I found him handsome. His cloak pulled aside, and I could see the lower part of his face. A chiseled jaw marked with stubble. You could have nearly ignored the unnerving feeling. A strand of long hair escaped the cowl. His eyes were shaded, and I longed to gaze into those of my rescuer. His hand moved away as he did so. He continued to speak.
I cannot promise what the future will hold.
The voice became a harsh, gravelly tone.
You will not be embraced by humans, nor will the divine offer you any form of peace. You will be able to see the world beyond all things. You will see the living, the dead, those that linger, and the divine. Yet, you will serve me as a daughter of night. You will not shift and change as the world does. You will remain as you are until the world dies as time falls apart.
I listened, comfortable and relaxed on the altar. No pain, no misery. Time no longer concerned me. I smiled, delirious and happy.
I cannot explain what this will do to you. Some daughters of night lose their minds through time, and the others must hunt them down.
He continued. I could hear him yet couldn't truly understand his words. I gazed up at the timeless tree, the long spanning branches, and only the sound of the bird's song in the distance, his words, and my ears longed to hear my heartbeat. My chest still rose and fell, mimicking breathing for air that I no longer needed. I could see shadows moving around me. Some people I recognized, and strangers wearing foreign clothing. It did not resemble anything I had ever seen before. The shadows murmured under their breaths. Words understood, forgotten, and unknown.
I need your answer. Will you become a daughter of night?
The question hung silently in the air. I didn't know what the other options were. How could I refuse my liberator? The one who saved me in death and blood. The god of death, my savior. I exhaled and no breath came out. Yes, I whispered. I will become a daughter of night. The god of death lifted the cowl so I could finally see his face. He was neither old nor young. There were no lines on his face to indicate that he smiled. His eyes were deep set, and I couldn't make out the color. He leaned down, and the remnants of my senses picked up on the aroma of the earth. A sweetness. And there was something my memory clung to yet could not remember the name. His forearms rested on either side of my head, and his head was low. His left hand morphed, surrounded by a swirling mist, into a shadow. A boned finger and thumb held open my eyelid. His other hand clasped beneath the lower part of his jaw. Nails pulling it off his skin tore from flesh, and revealed a bloody skull. His eyes were now hollow pits, void of life, and the fascination drew me in. My hand lifted to caress his cheek, and the other rested on his forearm. Soon my other eye was being held open, a twin to the other. A mist swirled and left his body before entering mine. I saw 1,000 deaths before I lost count of them. Some were in agony, while others were peaceful. I felt a contrast of emotions. Pleasure and pain, life and death, joy and suffering. My muscles twisted and contorted, fresh and reborn. My spirit body was regrowing, one made out of flesh and bone. A new one. The tree murmured in a language unknown, ancient and with the whisper of the earth. My back arched to lift off the stone altar. I heard my bones crack, and frozen air filled my lungs. It burned my throat, and I shot up, gripping my hands to my head, drowned by thousands of voices I never knew existed. I shook my head, screamed, and even struck my own face in an attempt to get the sounds to stop. Nothing worked. I coughed, feeling my lungs rip, and finally was left gasping for breath. I fell backward. I expected the back of my skull to strike against a stone slab, only to be caught by the god of death. His arms cradled me, tenderly, and lifted me so I can now observe my surroundings. My body changed. My mind, even more so. I could see his body surrounded by writing, swirling texts and words, all those I had never seen before.
Welcome, dear daughter of night.
He watched me closely and stepped back to allow me to take in my new existence. The world opened up in layers. It overwhelmed me. Memories, each and every painful one from when I was alive, returned. I screamed in pain and fury. My fingers carved into the surface of the sacrificial table, teeth bared like an animal. And I knew it was time. I want revenge on them. I growled, gazed up at his calm, stoic face. The god of death was silent. His hand offered to me, again, to assist me down from the stone slab, and I accepted it. My cold hand connected to his bone one. Touch felt different now. Everything gave off small vibrations, and together we walked. Passages of time and space rushed past us. Figures alien and normal to me as we walked back. The process then unknown to me. I trusted the god to lead me through this new world. He took me back to my village. They were going about their days as though nothing had happened. No one mourned my passing. I opened my mouth to speak, and one of the village women walked straight through me. I stared at her, only for a little boy to run through me, and he stopped, shivered, and turned to look where I stood. Only a blessed few could see us, most could not, and I smiled at this new ability I had.
They can only see you if you permit them, or they are close to death,
he explained, gestured with his hand in the direction of a sickly woman. It would not be long until he would come to claim her too. I could practically smell it. We saw my parents' house, and he did not stop me from walking inside. None of them could see me, no matter how much I wanted them to. No matter how much I screamed at them, cursed them, and berated them. They kept going through their day as though nothing had happened. I heard a faint sound, like the muffled sound of sobbing from one of the bedrooms, and I went to investigate. The god of death watched, mostly silent as I explored the world and followed. I saw my mother, curled up in a ball. Her body jerked, a muffled sob from her mouth that she desperately tried to keep hidden. I came closer. I could see the whites of her knuckles, and her face was red, tear-stained. In each choking sob, she murmured, "My name, and why?" Her body was fragile, looking far older than her years, and I felt a pang of guilt. I turned around and walked through the wall. My father was speaking to the mayor. My father was a proud man. He would often speak of our lineage and the family pride. My family were prosperous and well-favored at one point. To see him grovel filled my heart with a terrible pain. I could only hear broken fragments of what they were saying. Or rather, what the mayor was saying to my father. They knew the head priest and priestess had been brutally slain. The mayor paced back and forth, his senses heightened, hostile, and...
He is terrified. I believe he believed you would destroy him.
The god of death smirked, and I had a feeling he was encouraging me.
If you decide to destroy him, you could liberate your family. Yet, you need to let go of your revenge on them. Or you could destroy them all.
The two options offered, and I didn't know which to take. I could have torn them apart, yet that was not what I wanted. I desired to mark their souls. The choice before me. Death would be swift, passing before they would move on to their next life. And their souls would be free.
Or you could keep their souls wandering forever.
His words interrupting my thoughts. I didn't notice the change around me. We had gone back in time. My parents' home was the same as when I left. The signs of wealth returned. The quality of the clothing improved, and everyone looked well fed. I walked through the wall without realizing it to hear the commotion outside. It was the day I was taken to serve the Earth Goddess in her temple. Young me held the High Priest and High Priestess's hands. All my family was so happy, and the town looked truly prosperous. Buildings were maintained and painted vibrant colors. No one looked gaunt or sickly. I realize now, 2 out of 3 were dead. So many of the population had died. So many of my family had died. It was time for me to seek revenge.
You can...
He paused, gestured in the air and thought about his next words.
request the assistance of other members of the deceased to aid you.
Who best to serve me now? My thought instantly went to the priest and priestess to assist me. I knew where they were buried, and together we went to the earth mound and saw the entranceway. The protective markings glowed a vibrant blue. It took me a moment to realize how protected the high-ranked dead were from the beings that wander. I walked inside. Their bodies had been pried apart to bury them with honors and dignity. No doubt the mayor wished for the matter to be dealt with as quickly as possible.
Tell them to rise, daughter. It is their time.
How many of them?
All of them.
His hand turned the protective talismans of the head priest and priestess to dust. Instinctively, I knew what to do. I lifted my hands outward, palms down towards the remains of the two who destroyed my life, curled my fingertips and lifted. With a deep groan, their twisted bodies cracked and began to lift up. Their dim, half-rotted faces turned to me and jerked backwards. They remembered who I was in life. In death, I would be their master and tormentor. I heard other groans. Down the long crypt, others rose from their dead slumber, while others quivered, their intact talismans keeping them safe from my desires, and the soon dead of criminals walked towards us. Lumbering limbs and awkward sways, they made their way towards me, waiting for our instructions. I said nothing, and together we left the earth mound, the train of death following closely behind us. We walked towards the estate of the mayor, a man who enriched himself in the community and drove people into poverty. The god of death walked alongside me, grim and unstoppable.
Let them see you, my daughter. It is your time. Let his supporters see you, and those who survive will remember this night.
He bid. I believed they would, and so it was. My bare feet stepped on the ground, and I heard the screams of the guards. Many did not even need to be touched. They saw the risen and fell to the ground, their faces white and contorted with fear. We entered with no hesitation or resistance. Feast on them. Ease your suffering with their flesh. They let out a screech, unholy and fierce. They chased and grabbed hold of those too stunned to barricade themselves, and they were feasted on. Their screams and whimpers the last sounds they made. I walked past them, following the scent of the mayor, and he was my focus, my desire. I found him in his treasury, having abandoned his wife and children to my horde of the dead. He was clutching gold to his chest. He swore at me, cursed me through disbelieving tears, and I paused. The room was filled with wealth from the village, beautiful heirlooms, and symbols of family's prosperity. I cared little for my human life now. Every moment, my humanity slipped from me, yet he had no excuse. I read his mind. You want to be wealthy forever, I murmured, close to his trembling ear. The screams from outside had died down now. Any survivors had fled. I heard the rambling sound of my risen army, the aroma of fresh blood and the last movements of the dead on their bodies. My hands reached out, boned and lifeless as I molded his living flesh. I broke his bones, twisted his limbs, and kept him alive, never permitting him the mercy of death. He would never have that. I carved runes into his flesh, rubbed ash into the wounds, and spat into his mouth to complete the transformation. He was lifted up onto metal spikes, driven through his body, his mouth eternally held open, and an intense, constant flame lit beneath him. I dropped a single gold coin into his mouth, watched it melt and pass through him before adding another. You will be wealthy, yet you will never be able to hold on to it. I pondered making his home my temple, a place of consistency. The god of death, my father, had made his way elsewhere, and for the time being, I was alone. I knew I would see him again. I hope you enjoyed this story. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Gallo, an extremely talented narrator and author. Please check him out if you haven't already. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, patrons, subscribers, and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Please check out my social media links in the description below. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.